recollections of covering Bill and how the son reflected what you knew from your knowledge of sports history, how the son reflected the father.
Well, it's interesting listening to people who worked with Bill, who were his colleagues and employees. I come at it from a completely different point of view. To me, Bill was an annuity. Sports writers would have people who you would write about a lot. Bobby Knight was an annuity. You just knew twice a year he was going to do something you wanted to write about. I think covering Leo DeRocher would have been that way. But it seems to me it's kind of strange to have the owner of a team, who is generally this Olympian figure, who sits in an office and you don't see much. And when he comes down, he's sort of scripted. He behaves in a certain way. Whereas with Bill, he was there and he was so interesting, and you knew that there would be once or twice a year, if you were paying attention, that you were going to write about him. It's just the way it was. And he was always so fascinating and so interesting that sometimes you'd sit and talk to him and you'd be just kind of blown away by what he was saying, to the extent that you'd forget to take notes. And you'd walk away later thinking about, I wish my memory was better, or I should have brought my tape recorder, or I should have kind of scribbled notes. But that would, of course, ruin the moment. They talk about, it's a very funny line, 9 in the morning to 5 in the morning. A couple of times I would go to the Barnes room after a game at Comiskey Park, saying, this time I'm going to outlast him. Well, Bill was there drinking beer after beer after beer. I never saw him drink anything stronger. And I also never saw him take solid food. And I never came close to outlasting him. That just wasn't going to happen. But I think that the writers had a kind of a special relationship with Bill. I'm working on a project now for the University of Chicago Press. It's going to come out 2 years from now, but I'm almost done. It's an anthology of Chicago sports columnists, from Ring Lardner to Elliot. You can't tell me this, but from Ring Lardner to Jay Mariani. I mean, the entire 100 years history. And when I went to look up, we needed a column about Bill, and the problem was not finding a good one, but finding 100 good ones. Skip Bayless wrote a great column, Bob Verdi wrote a great column, Jerry Holtzman wrote a great column, Dave Condon wrote a great column. I was kind of happy about one or two that I wrote myself, But there was something about Bill that captured sports writers through generations. Condon writing about him in the 30s, Holtzman writing about him in the 40s and the 50s, and then on and on and on until the day he died. And the interesting thing about it was that as I was trying to choose the one column from Bill that I was going to include in the book, everybody had written so well. It was, all of them were just great, and finally I just flipped a coin. I wouldn't tell you which one I used, except that it wasn't mine. And it was just astonishing, and I thought, gee, what's the reason for this? Is it because Bill, in approaching Bill, you realized you were dealing with a giant of the game, a pioneer, and that you wanted to do your very best work, and you were really going to write something, going to bring your A game to this? Or was it because Bill just made it so easy? You couldn't write a bad column about Bill. All you had to do was write down what he said. Anyway, covering him was like, sports writers, I think I'm giving away any secrets here, can be kind of a jaded bunch. We kind of get kind of cynical about who we write about. Never about Bill. All the columns that I read about him, all the pieces that I've seen, I'd like to think the columns that I wrote about him, and I wrote about him a number of times over the years, you couldn't help but reflect the sunniness of the man. His innate optimism and good nature and sense of humor, not to mention his intelligence and the fact that he read 3 books a day before breakfast and all that kind of thing. He was the smartest guy ever, the best read. But he was unique among all the people we covered, and I think if these other writers were here today, they would tell you the same thing. And although he made it easy for us, and although he was an annuity, and although you knew you were going to write about him twice a year, you also realized, and you wouldn't say this about too many people who you wrote about, it was an honor to cover them, to be around him. From a journalistic point of view, never mind if you were a friend or not, but just as a subject of journalism.
Yeah, really unique.